and welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess and today I'm going to do a quick video looking at the books that I read in September. So I had a pretty good start to my reading month in September, to my reading in the month of September, but in this last week I've not picked up very much at all. A bit of a mixture of just a bit of a hectic work week and some nice things as well. I got to see the National Theatre live production of Ian McKellen's King Lear, so that was really lovely, but so it just meant that it was a bit of a busy week for picking up books. But let's get into the books that I did finish in September. So the first book that I finished in September was I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. This book I very much enjoyed. It is following Michelle's obsession into the Golden State Killer and trying to find the identity of this person. So the Golden State Killer was a serial rapist and murderer back in the 70s and 80s in the state of California, and until earlier this year he had never been caught. And Michelle is a journalist and she was very interested in true crime, and she became quite obsessed with this case, and this details all her research and her time spent exploring the area and delving into this case. So this was actually put together posthumously. Michelle died before she finished this book, and I believe it was the editor and her husband that kind of pieced together lots of material, some of her columns around this on this topic and the chapters that she'd already completed. So this is quite a broken up read. It does feel unfinished and unpolished. There are some stunning chapters in this which you can really see that Michelle was a fantastic writer. I would still recommend this book if you are into true crime. There are some horrific scenes in this and retellings of the actual crimes that happened. It's a horrifying true crime case, and one that I had heard nothing about at all, and yet he was such a prolific criminal. It is a fascinating look at Michelle and her obsession, and also the person behind these crimes. So the second book I picked up in September was The People in the Trees. I picked this up in one of the bookshops in Hay-on-Wye in August, and I've been wanting to get to this for a really long time. I think I saw it about a couple of years ago on Jen Campbell's channel and have been interested in getting to this one since, but only just managed to pick it up. But so I was very keen to get to this one straight away. This is a fascinating book that is framed as if it is a non-fiction memoir. So it is following the story of Norton Perina, who is a scientist who embarks on an expedition to the Micronesian Islands, where there is believed to be a tribe who have discovered a way to become immortal, or at least live a prolonged life. And it is Norton's memoirs of his time on this expedition and then also the years following it. The memoir is written whilst Norton is now in prison. So the book opens with some newspaper reports telling you that Norton has been arrested for sexual assaults, and then a further report to say that he has been charged and sentenced. So he's writing this memoir from his in prison, reflecting back on his time. This is a really fascinating read. It's quite a difficult read at some parts, and Norton is not a likeable character, so it's a real, you sort of you hate him as you're reading about him, and there's nothing particularly endearing about him, but it's still a fascinating character study, and you definitely get this sense of an unreliable narrator, because the preface to the memoir is written by Norton's friend, who tells us that he has lightly edited this book where necessary, and then throughout the memoir there are footnotes that he has added to help you to understand the context a little further. So you know that he's trying to show Norton in his best light possibly, and yet you still don't particularly like Norton. So this was a really fascinating read, and I gave this one 5 stars. The next book that I finished in September, or part of a book, was the play Julius Caesar from my Complete Works of William Shakespeare. So this was my first reading of Julius Caesar. I have seen an adaptation of it in Stratford-upon-Avon at one of the Royal Shakespeare Theatres, but this was the first time that I read it, and I really enjoyed the reading of it. I was pleased to see that I remembered it pretty well from when I saw it several years ago now. So that was a really enjoyable read, and that was part of my participation of ShapeTube, so I really enjoyed watching some of the videos analysing this and just helping me to explore the play a little further. I can't find it in my copy now, but I've made lots of annotations to it, so I'm looking forward to getting back to that and rereading it at a later date as well. Then I read Checking Out by Nick Spalding. Now this is my book club, my In Real Life book club's pick for the month, so that was why I picked this one up. And this is a contemporary, it reads quite chick litty, not that I particularly like that word, but it's quite a light read. The storyline follows Nathan James, who's a very successful person. He's created these children's characters and writes the music for them, and he's made himself a lot of money with that, and he's living a very shallow life when he finds out that he has got a kind of benign brain tumour that is life-threatening, and it will eventually kill him. And so it's his look at very much mortality, so we've moved from immortality to mortality. It's his look at how can he live his life knowing that it could end any second, but at the same time he doesn't know how long he's got left, so he moves between wanting to do everything and make his mark on the world before he leaves, and then panicking that that could happen any moment. And there is a love story element to this, so the quote on the back is, how can you give your heart to somebody when you know that it's about to stop? And it's his difficulties in entering into this relationship, and obviously it's not something that you want to share on a first date, but then at what point do you tell a person that you are perhaps starting to fall in love with that you perhaps do not have very long left to live? So it was quite an endearing story. I didn't particularly enjoy the writing style. It's written in present tense, and I found that really hard. So it's almost stream of consciousness, but it's just his thoughts all the time, and I felt very much like he was telling me what he felt, and as opposed to showing me in any way. So, you know, it was him talking about how he's lived this shallow life and now how he suddenly had this realisation, but you didn't really see that happen. It was just him telling you his thoughts throughout it. So I didn't particularly enjoy this read. I gave it 2.5 stars. But it'll be an interesting one to discuss at the book club and see what the other members thought of this. And then the final book that I finished in September was See What I Have Done by Sarah Schmidt. This book was longlisted for the Women's Prize earlier this year. I don't know whether it made it to the shortlist, and it is a debut novel for Sarah Schmidt. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. It is a fictionalised account of the Lizzie Borden murders. Lizzie Borden was a girl who was accused and tried for the axe murders of her father and stepmother in 1895, roughly, end of the 1800s. And she was acquitted for their murder. She was never found guilty, and she continued to live in the town where it happened and became very much ostracised by the community. So this is Sarah Schmidt's fictionalised account of that, and you follow the story from the perspective of different characters. So there's Lizzie Borden, her sister Emma, and the maid of the household Bridget, and then also a character called Benjamin, who is brought in to the household by Lizzie's uncle to frighten or to do something to Lizzie's father to make him behave better. So you get this idea that he's quite a sinister character in it, and but you get to see the events over a couple of days. So it's sort of the day of the murder, the day before the murder, and then the final part moves on to several years later after the trials have finished. So it's set, a lot of the chapters are set on the day that the murder actually took place, the 4th of August 1892 it was, sorry. And then there are a few that are the day before leading up to those events, and you kind of flick between those 2 days mostly. I loved the chapters from Lizzie's perspective. You get an impression that she is a very interesting character, and you get this real sense of her not fully grasping what has happened, and there is a very sinister undertone, but you're still not sure whether she might have done it or not. The voice of Lizzie was very clear, whereas I felt the other voices kind of blended in a little bit more. There's very clear dialect, so Bridget is an Irish maid, so you have her dialect in there, but Lizzie really stood out for me as the perspective. It was her perspective that I enjoyed reading the most. Again, some quite graphic scenes in this, some quite gory scenes, but it really gave you the sense of this very toxic, claustrophobic life that the Borden household had become. And again, there was no characters that you really liked in this. You know, Lizzie's parents have been murdered incredibly brutally, and you don't feel that bad for them. The father does some really quite cruel things towards Lizzie, and so you get this sense of perhaps is it revenge, and how did they get here? So a really fascinating, again, sort of character study on this family within this household. And like I said, Sarah Schmidt did a really good job of creating this very toxic feeling atmosphere to the household and making it all feel very claustrophobic, and the writing within this really gave you that sense of that's the sinister undertone, and you really couldn't place who that was coming from. By the end of it, I was none the wiser as to whether Lizzie had done it or not, and I think that was done very well, because obviously we don't know the outcome of that. She was never found guilty of it, although some people still believe that she was responsible for the murders. But I thoroughly enjoyed this read. 5-star read for me. So those are the 5 books that I read in September. If you watched my last video, my Tackling My TBR, you know that I was hoping to finish War and Peace and a further couple of plays in the Shakespeare book. So I'm still partway through Titus Andronicus. I will definitely finish that one in probably today or tomorrow. And I do still intend to get to Hamlet, although we're now past ShakeTube month. And War and Peace I am still chipping away at. Like I said, I had a bit of a lapse reading week for this final week, so I didn't get through as much as I was hoping to there. But I'm focusing on trying to get 5 books read off my TBR for October, so I'm hoping that those other reads that I was intending to get finished by the end of this month can slot nicely in between those. So that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you in my next one.